Hello, welcome to Heady Remarks. My air conditioning is on. It's hot. Fallon is on vacation. So it's just me, and I'm going to talk about psychopaths or psychopathy. And I've been pretty fascinated with that. These types of people. This personality disorder, I suppose it's called. And it's just an interesting topic. So, should I turn that off? Dang it. I don't know. Okay, well, hope you can hear me all right. Robert D. Hare, also known as Bob Hare, is like the main go-to guy. He coined the term, I believe, psychopath. And I've read, hi Archie! I've read a lot of books about them. I've read Bob Hare's book, Without Conscience. And he also wrote one called Snakes in Suits. I think he co-wrote it with someone else, which is about, it focuses on psychopathy in the workplace, because apparently there's a lot of them in positions of leadership. They're drawn to jobs where they'll have power over others. So they are drawn to jobs like police officer. Obviously, that doesn't mean all police officers are psychopaths, but they are drawn to that. And they're drawn to being politicians, surgeons. Being a surgeon is kind of interesting for them because it's a good job for them because, I mean, unless they're criminal, bad things could happen, but, oh, hello, welcome. But they don't, one of the most fascinating aspects of them to me is along with not experiencing, qualms of conscience, but also the fact that they don't really seem to experience fear, and they don't respond to punishment. But there has been some success treating them with, they do respond to reward. So that's just interesting, like they will maybe, you can catch it early, I guess, and try to treat them. And like in kids, they won't call a kid a psychopath. They don't like to label a child that way. But if they are showing signs of having a potential to become one, I think they call them callous unemotional. And at that point, I guess you can try to steer them in a good direction where they, just hopefully keep them from committing crime. So the Psychopathy Checklist that Bob Hare came up with, there are 20 items on the checklist. Each of the 20 items are given one of 3 possible scores, which are as follows. 0, it doesn't apply to the patient at all. 1, it applies somewhat, meaning the trait is there, but it's not highly dominant in the person. And then they can be scored a 2, which means it fits the person perfectly. It defines dominant traits in character and or behavior. The scoring process itself is based on thorough investigation carried out prior to the final scoring assignment. So like by a therapist or a psychologist. I had to burp, sorry. Though there are websites that state otherwise, the assessment procedure itself consists of a number of tests, interviews, and research into the patient's past, including criminal, medical, and educational history, work history, physical movement between locations and home addresses, relationships, and possible marital history and or status, and not least, interviews with as many people as possible to know who know or knew the subject, family, coworkers, teachers, friends, neighbors, counselors, therapists, etc., This is not a diagnosis that is given lightly. If the clinician honors the ethical implications of the seriousness of psychopathy and stays true to his Hippocratic oath. A person who receives a score at or above 30 is considered a psychopath and will receive the psychopathy diagnosis. The highest possible score a person can get is 40. You were so cute, but you're being annoying. The average neurotypical normal person receives a score between 3 and 6? Wait, what? 3 and 6, 4 being the average estimate? What do you mean? The average non-psychopathic criminal receives a score between 16 and 22. Okay, weird. So if you're normal, you should get a really low score. I don't know, that's weird. But you have to get a 30 to be considered a psychopath? Yeah, that's Archie. So, weird. The average criminal, sociopath, and or antisocial personality disordered individual receives a score between 22 and 26. Okay, so they're trying to make the distinction between, that's what I hate the word sociopath. That word should not even exist. It just causes confusion. We already had a name for it. Because at first people started saying sociopath instead of psychopath, almost like they were interchangeable. And then they started making this distinction where it's like, well, the sociopath is someone whose childhood influenced their behavior, like some sort of like abuse or sexual abuse or something like that, any sort of abuse in childhood. That's called antisocial personality disorder. So that like already existed, and it's just like a pet peeve of mine. It's annoying. You're heavy, Archie. This isn't sustainable, Archie. Okay. You good? Oh, still using, okay. You're weird. So yeah, sociopath is basically the same thing as antisocial personality disorder. The serious criminal, sociopath, and or antisocial personality disordered individual receives a score between 26 and 29. Criminal psychopaths receive a score between 30 and 40. A non-criminal psychopath receives a score between 30 and 34. Yeah, because they're not all criminals, They can function all right in the world for the most part, I think, probably. I don't know. Approximately 1 in 45 receives a score of 40. What does that mean? 1 in 45. That's the highest score. Anyway, here's the checklist. Maybe I should share. Share screen. Okay. So, factor 1, glibness / superficial charm. I don't know what, I hate that. Grandiose sense of self-worth. I don't think I have either of these. Need for stimulation and proneness to boredom. Maybe. I might have that. But you can have you can share traits on these lists, but it doesn't mean anything unless you have consistent, you're showing that trait consistently in all aspects of your life, whether it be personal, school, work, just in your general, yeah. It doesn't mean you're a psychopath just because you have 1 or 2 of them. Pathological lying. I don't do that. That's good. Cunning and manipulative. I suppose I have the potential to be that way, but I'm not prone to it. I don't like it. Lack of remorse or guilt. I definitely don't have that. Shallow affect. i.e. superficial experience and expression of emotions. Yeah, so they seem shallow. Callous, lack of empathy. That sort of seems like the same. I guess it's not quite the same thing. Guilt has more to do with something bad you've done. And then lack of empathy, I guess, just has to do with relating to others. The first one is just being handsome. I don't know about that. Superficial charm. I mean, I wish I had that. I wish I had I'm sure there's good-looking men who are like not charming. Their personality just sucks. Okay, so factor 2, I don't know why there's two different. The groups have been given the terms factor 1 and factor 2 traits. Factor 1 traits are sometimes called classic psychopathy characteristics or true psychopathy characteristics. These are the traits that describe the psychological, mental, or emotional characteristics. They pertain to how the person feels, his emotional makeup, his thought process, and the general mindset resulting of these. Okay, so that's the difference between the two. Factor 1 is like their emotions and stuff, and then factor 2 is like their behavior, an individual's conduct, his activities, and demeanor. Interesting. Okay, so factor 2 traits, parasitic lifestyle. I don't do that. I mean, it's just natural to want to sort of question if you do these. But yeah, like people who are mooches, parasitic, you're charming. I'm not. When I first meet people, it's like psychopaths make very good first impressions. They're really good at just making excellent first impressions. They run into trouble when they try to sustain that because, yeah, like their behavior, reveals what they are, basically. Okay, so poor behavioral controls, promiscuous sexual behavior, early behavior problems. Yeah, well, see, that's also juvenile delinquency. I guess that is two different things, but lack of realistic long-term goals, impulsivity. And again, that almost seems like the same thing as poor behavioral controls, but whatever. Irresponsibility, failure to accept responsibility for one's own actions. I'm sure there's a difference between these two. They seem very similar. Oh God, air conditioning's on again. You know what? I should turn it off. It's coming on too much because it's hot. Many short-term marital relationships. Yeah, for some reason they're prone to hopping into getting married. And then there's the juvenile delinquency, like trouble with the law before you become an adult. Revocation of conditional release. That's a weird one because that's one where it's like they're supposed to be released, but it's decided that they are not safe to be released. Revocation of conditional release. It's weird. Criminal versatility. Yeah, so they'll be able to do very many different types of crimes. They don't just focus on one thing. And so the book that I was just listening to was by this guy, Hervey Cleckley. And it was called The Mask of Sanity. And it's a pretty old book. I think it was written in the 50s. I could be totally wrong. But it was kind of funny because there's one chapter where it talks about homosexuality. And I listened to it on Audible. So before that chapter, they were like, okay, it was like a trigger warning. Basically, it was like, this was written before stuff changed. And it was kind of funny. Yeah, as far as I know, homosexuality has almost nothing to do with psychopathy. You can be gay or not. It doesn't really matter. But yeah. It was funny. The chapter, like, it was an interesting chapter in general, just like an old-fashioned version of someone like analyzing gay men's behavior, and it was kind of silly. But I don't know why it was in a book about psychopaths. Didn't really make sense. 16 was the worst. Wait, what was that again? Failure to accept responsibility. Yeah. It's so weird. They're so weird because their behavior, like, it doesn't always benefit them. They are trying to cheat people and mislead people and lying to people and manipulating people and trying to get one over on them, but getting caught over and over and over again and put back into jail, that can't be fun. And they don't enjoy being imprisoned. And a lot of the subjects in the book I listened to were actually in mental health facilities, but I imagine most of them end up in the prison system. But because they don't respond to punishment, as soon as they're released, they go right back to doing, like, almost immediately, they go right back to their bad behavior. They just go right back to it. It's so weird. But maybe that's a good time to talk about, where is it? Quiet! I'm busy! Where the heck is it? Oh, here's brains. Okay, so I don't really understand. It's pointing to the amygdala in the normal brain. I can't really see it, but okay, so over here in the psychopath brain, it's just black, I guess. So I don't know what I'm looking at. I don't know if I'm looking at tissue or activity. I guess it's not lit up because there's less activity there. So I've heard that their amygdalas are underdeveloped and underused and, yeah, like physically smaller. And then, so I think this is a picture from behind of the brain. I'm not sure. I don't understand. I don't know what I'm looking at, but it does look like a boxing glove. But anyway, medial prefrontal cortex in a normal person, very lit up. And then here, not very lit up. And so, yeah, that's why it's such a fascinating thing, is because I think it is a physical, maybe genetic thing, you know, because there's so many people on the internet, especially when I used to be obsessed with true crime stuff. I did notice, like, even just recently, people online trying to make excuses for stuff. Like, I was watching a video about that MMA fighter, War Machine, who almost killed his girlfriend. Like, she barely escaped. She had to jump off a balcony naked, bloody, like, run to her neighbor's house. And, like, she came very close to being a dead lady. But people in the comments are all like, talking about how he had been in prison and how he was in, Archie, please be quiet. He was in solitary confinement, apparently. So they're trying to blame it on that, saying, oh, he was in solitary confinement for some other bullshit he got in trouble for, and then they released him, like, trying to, like, justify his behavior by saying that he was mistreated by the prison system or something. And I just hate that. I see that a lot. People don't want to believe that someone might behave a certain way. Like, I'm not saying that guy's a psychopath necessarily. I have no idea, but they just don't understand the idea of somebody who inflicts pain on others for no reason, almost enjoys it. Less brain activity in those areas. Yeah, there's this thing called, so if we're going to talk about kids a little bit, that's a really touchy subject, but it is interesting because just imagine you're a normal parent couple and you have a kid, and out of nowhere, it starts, your son or daughter starts displaying these traits, and how upsetting that can be. And it's just like not even necessarily your fault. And that's just fascinating to me. I was wondering, like, could this be an evolutionary thing? I shouldn't talk about evolution if Fallon's not here, but, you know, suppose it's some sort of mutation that, I don't know. I don't know what the purpose of it would be. If it's beneficial, it'll last, and if not. But, okay, what the hell was I looking at? Oh, yeah, this guy, James Fallon, I was trying to remember his name, and I'm like, was his name Jimmy Fallon? Apparently it was, but James Fallon. But this guy was a neuroscientist who studied brains, and he was working on what's it called when you get old and you forget stuff? Alzheimer's disease. So he was studying that, and a picture of his own brain got mixed in with some. I guess he was also studying psychopaths, because he thought that one of the psychopaths, he was studying psychopathy, but at the same time, he was doing a brain scan of himself and all his family members to try to determine if it was just something to do with Alzheimer's. And anyway, he was like, oh, one of the psychopath brains must have gotten in with mistakenly gotten in with the other brain scans. And actually, no, he was the psychopath. Like, he knew how to recognize that in a brain scan, and he was surprised to discover that he was one. So maybe let's listen to what this guy has to say, and if I'm allowed to. I don't know. Maybe I'm not allowed to. But oh shoot, I don't think I shared audio. I do not learn, you guys. What did I do? Share screen. Yes, share audio. The hell, go away. Okay, let's try that again.
Murderers, of schizophrenics, normal brain scans, PET scans, and your own brain scan, and you discover that in your own brain, it is the same kind of brain as a psychopath.
Yeah, that was like the worst case, because all those areas of the brain that I had decided, by looking at these, that were involved in, the psychopathic personality, I had all of them, and it was completely turned off. And it had to do with emotional regulation.
So you can actually see in a brain scan if somebody's a psychopath?
Not really. What you can see are changes that are consistent with traits. So I can look at different brain scans and say that person's got a language problem, that person's got a problem with their visual system or sense of space. So you can see traits.
And the traits of a psychopath that are clear to you, that you think you have, are what?
Well, it's a very poor sense of morality, first of all.
Hold on, I don't know if it's gonna let me play this for too long. He's kind of boring anyway. Honestly, he likes to hear himself talk. Let's go to the article about it maybe instead. The neuroscientist who discovered he was a psychopath. While studying brain scans to search for patterns that correlated with psychopathic behavior, James Fallon found out that his own brain fit the profile. The last name is my first name. No, not TED Talk. He's a neuroscientist who accidentally discovered. I mean, did he do a TED Talk? Maybe he did a TED Talk. I don't know. If you're talking about the guy that found out he was a psychopath, then yeah. One afternoon in October 2005, neuroscientist James Fallon was looking at brain scans of serial killers. As part of a research project at UC Irvine, he was sifting through thousands of PET scans to find anatomical patterns in the brain that correlated with psychopathic tendencies in the real world. I was also doing a study on Alzheimer's, and as a part of that, had brain scans from me and everyone in my family right on my desk. I got to the bottom of the stack and saw this scan that was obviously pathological, he says, noting that it showed low activity in certain areas of the frontal and temporal lobes linked to empathy, morality, and self-control. Knowing that it belonged to a member of his family, Fallon checked his lab's PET machine for an error. It was working fine, and then decided he simply had to break the blinding that prevented him from knowing whose brain was pictured. And when he looked up the code, it was greeted by an unsettling revelation. The psychopathic brain pictured in the scan was his own. I think he did. It was about psycho. That's funny. Huh. it was his own. So anyway, then he started talking about it. He's not a murderer. He's never done anything horrible to anyone. But he talks about how his wife did say, like, oh, it kind of makes sense because he had a tendency to be unfeeling and callous. And he actually had learned how to sort of fake the emotions to keep his wife happy that he wasn't feeling. Like, that's another thing about psychopaths is they can learn. They're not always like super smart, but they do tend to have higher like IQ, but low EQ, as they call it. They've said a psychopath knows the words, but not the tune. They miss out on a rich tapestry of emotions. I don't know if they truly experience love. The emotions they do have seem to be like very ego-driven. Yeah, it must have been quite shocking. I'm going to watch the trailer for The Good Son.
You know this one? Great big gobs of greasy, grimy gopher gut, mutilated monkey meat, chocolate little piggy feet, French fried eyeballs swimming in a pool of blood. That sure tastes good.
Henry, come on down here.
Behind his smile lies a secret.
Here, made two of them, so we could be brothers. Hey, Mark, come on, let's go. Where are we going?
Behind his eyes lies a plan.
Who is he? Mr. Highway. Wow. What are you gonna do with him?
And behind the image of a good son
Coming? So what are you guys up to out there? Sorry, Mom. Top secret. Where are we going? We're here.
lies the terrifying truth.
Say goodbye. But you know you did. You could have killed people. I feel sorry for you. You just don't know how to have fun. What? You're a doctor. You know things.
Some things.
What if there was this boy who did these terrible things because he liked doing it? Such a sweet little thing. It'd be too bad if something were to happen to her. What do you say he was evil?
I don't believe in evil.
Sure.
When innocence is just a mask.
Do you really think I'd hurt her? You wouldn't. You are Mark. So violent.
When trust becomes a weapon, then anyone can become the next victim.
Henry. No! Susan! If I let you go, you think you could fly?
Macaulay Culkin, The Good Son.
I like that movie. Fallon said she thinks it's creepy. She hated it. I think Fallon hates it. What the hell? Stop! Jesus. Okay, anyway, no, not Home Alone. The Good Son. It's about a child with callous, unemotional traits. Creepy as hell. And I was really hoping I could watch this movie that was made like in the 50s called The Bad Seed. It's on this Internet Archive website, which usually means that it's like public domain. I don't know. It's another movie about callous and emotional. Let's watch that trailer. It's an old black and white movie.
might get kind of lonesome with that soldier boy Hare gone.
I wish she were mine. Every time I look at her, I wish I had just such a little girl.
Psychopath.
This has been a terrible tragedy for Mrs. Daigle as she's lost her only child.
That know-it-all Monica Breedlove. I don't think
This is
nobody knows
weird.
anything but her.
He has the mind of an 8-year-old, but he's managed to produce a family, so I keep him on.
Me those shoes back.
Oh, no, I got them shoes hid where nobody but me can find them.
Better give me those shoes. They're mine. Give them back to me.
I believe you did it. What do you give me if I give you a basket of kisses?
I'll give you a basket of hugs.
I'll miss your hugs.
Well, I'm not letting the slightest degree really knows what she's told of you. Don't mind me being presumptuous. I had a long talk with that guard since I saw you last. And that was a long, interesting conversation. He said he saw Rhoda on the pier just before Claude was found among the pilings. She knows something, all right.
Did you have anything, I don't care how small it was, did you have anything to do with the way Claude got drowned?
What makes you ask that, Mother?
Now look me in the eye and tell me the truth, because I must know.
No, Mother, I didn't.
You're not going back to the Fern School next year. They don't want you anymore.
Okay.
I'm going to call Miss Fern and have her come over here.
You think I lied to
You
her?
did lie to her.
But not to you, Mother, not to you.
You know something? Miss Fern dyes her hair.
This is so weird.
And
What am I
Rhoda's a
doing?
sweet, perfectly sound little girl.
Whose father is she?
Hi, Daddy. Next to Daddy, you lift me up best. Why do you look at me?
I just want to see your face.
This is a trailer. It's a weird trailer. It is a good movie though. It's funny. Okay, that was weird. Nope. Okay. I don't know. I don't know what I'm doing. Stuff and things, brain, psychopath. Oh yeah, there was a very interesting. I have to read you this. Okay, so several early studies. Wait, is this right? Where is it? Fear and anxiety are emotions often used interchangeably to describe an unpleasant state of apprehensive tension. They typically involve increases in physiological arousal, including increases in heart rate, pulse, respiration, and sweating. I'm familiar with these symptoms. On a psychological level, there is a desire to avoid, escape, and reduce the perceived tension. Some prefer to use these terms as distinct, with anxiety defined as feelings related to an ambiguous or impending threat, and fear reserved for feelings associated with a specific immediate threat. Although this differentiation may be useful, we do not distinguish the two emotions in this discussion. Several early studies reported reduced physiological activity associated with aversive or threatening stimuli in psychopathic individuals, such as electric shocks, loud noises. Reviewing studies in which offenders were exposed to predictable electric shock in a countdown paradigm, Hare, 1978, reported that psychopathic offenders display reduced skin conductance activity in anticipation of the shock, but not reduced heart rate. Okay. Similarly, Ogloff and Wong reported that offenders with psychopathic traits displayed heart rate increases, but not skin conductance increases in anticipation of loud noise. There are two important caveats about these findings. First, reduced physiological responses in psychopaths have more consistently been reported when the onset of the aversive stimulus was forewarned than when it was not. Consequently, it appears that psychopaths are not generally under-responsive to aversive stimuli. Rather, they appear consciously or unconsciously, they appear to consciously or unconsciously employ a coping style that buffers them from the negative effects of an aversive stimulus if they have the opportunity to prepare for the onset of the stimulus. Second, findings are relatively consistent in heart rate and cardiovascular indices. Hare suggested that the normal and, in some cases, heightened heart rate responses reflected active coping to reduce the impact of noxious stimuli, and the smaller skin conductance responses indicated that this attempt at active coping was successful. An ability to prepare and reduce the impact of noxious stimulation that is forewarned. Low fear hypothesis. There would be no need for such a coping response in the absence of a fear response. That these findings actually suggest a novel approach to coping with threats, as suggested by the affect dysregulation theory. I don't know what's going on anymore. Okay, they propose youth with psychopathic traits learn to rely on this sort of mechanism to reduce not only the impact of external threats, but also the impact of negative emotions. Yeah, because there's another study where they, the movie's good, but okay. I mean, if you can stand old movies, which I can't. Some people can't. But, fear and anxiety. Okay, 2 studies have used film clips to induce fear and anxiety in PCL-identified psychopaths and non-psychopaths. Patterson's and Forth's studies included not only subjective responses, but also facial expressions, and in one case, autonomic and electrocortical responses. These studies are further discussed below because they examine not only fear, but also anger, sadness, and happiness in prisoner participants. With respect to the clips employed to elicit fear or anxiety, these studies indicated no significant group differences in facial expression, heart rate, skin conductance, electrocortical response, or self-reported anxiety or fear. So what? Okay, so they reported that inmates with high scores on both PCL-R factors, factor 1 and 2, and also inmates with high scores on only the social deviance dimension displayed smaller increases than non-psychopathic inmates in both heart rate and skin conductance for the fear-provoking versus the neutral situations. Okay, so they don't respond the same as normal people would to things that should give you like anxiety or distress or fear or whatever. Like they're really calm. That's why they make good surgeons, because they're very calm. They're bored. They're not suffering. I mean, like their behavior causes failure in their life. They end up, in prison or whatever, or setbacks. They lose things that they worked for. So like it does affect them negatively, but they don't seem to be suffering. They are not mentally ill. They're not sick, which is why it's kind of funny, because psychopath, the word doesn't path mean sick. It's like psycho means mind, brain, and then pathology is like illness. So it's just kind of funny because it's a bit of a misnomer. I didn't understand what psychopath wrote this. Well, fear-provoking, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, because they're also not very good. Like if a child hears another child crying nearby, the callous, unemotional child is not bothered by it. They're not as good at like noticing distress in others. You know, there's that lack of empathy. And it's weird because they'll get really emotional about things that seem petty and shallow and unimportant. You know, so it's just weird what things elicit strong emotions out of them. Like Ted Bundy started crying, talking about a bike he had as a kid. And it's like, but then he goes and like doesn't give a shit about people he's murdered. You know, like they don't really, they lack emotional depth. They don't learn from, they'll just do the same thing over and over and over again. It's just crazy. Like, I'm trying to think. Yeah, so in that study, they're counting down. So they knew an electric shock was coming. And the psychopaths are less bothered by that. That would be kind of cool. I kind of wish I didn't have to feel like fear, you know, nervousness, self-doubt. Psychopaths never think there's anything wrong with them. They use people. They can really ruin your life if you're not careful. You gotta watch out. There was one chapter that was interesting. It was talking about a so-called female psychopath that was, I mean, yeah, there's females too, obviously. They're a little different, sort of similar. Like, you know how with autistic people, like you have to learn the difference between male autistics and female autistics. Apparently female autistics are better at like hiding it and coping with it. Anyway, but with psychopaths, it was talking about this lady who, she was like promiscuous, I guess. She wasn't like passionate. Like I don't know, the doctor was trying to explain to her how it might be hurting herself to have sex with so many men without them really having to work for it. And she felt like she was getting one over on them because she would like inwardly be tickled by their attempts to woo her or convince her, you know, they're trying to get her to, and how she just didn't care. She like didn't care. She didn't care about them. She didn't want anything from them. She just would, you know, have her orgasms from sex and like move on. It wasn't, I don't know. Since it was an old book, I was wondering if maybe, I don't know. It was treating her as if her behavior was so weird, you know, but I don't know. It's not necessarily that weird. But I don't know. She just, yeah, she felt like she was getting something over on them somehow. I'm not really sure how, but she just wasn't really passionate about it. They're just sort of like, I don't know. I can see how they get bored. Impulsive. Like I'm impulsive sometimes. I can understand that. But I don't know. 43 minutes. I should have read that book by I wanted to read Jeffrey Dahmer's dad wrote a book. And it's sort of an interesting example of like a normal childhood, normal parents, nothing too horrific, nothing too abnormal, out of the ordinary at all. And, you know, people don't like that. They want to believe that there's an explanation and that they can somehow prevent raising a psychopath. And that's the creepy thing, is maybe you can't. But they're not all like murderers and all that, so. But it is just interesting, like Ted Bundy said he kind of felt bad for people who could feel guilt. He felt bad for people who felt guilty about stuff. I mean, Maybe he saw it as an advantage. Yes, stupid psychopaths go to jail and smart psychopaths run a Fortune 500 company. Yeah, like they do white collar crime. I feel like Bernie Madoff was a psychopath. Maybe Jordan Belfort. Not that I'm an expert. I'm not supposed to do that, but should we watch this guy a little more? I don't know. I was just worried because it's CNN. They might get mad at me.
And like for me and for for people who are psychopaths, they can have a sense of ethics, the rules of behavior. But actually, the deep morality, what we consider morality, is not there.
So psychopath, I mean, do you have a sense of empathy?
I have a sense of what's called cognitive empathy.
So rationally,
I understand when somebody is in pain.
Okay.
But what I don't have so much of is emotional empathy. So I have what would be more like sympathy. I'm involved in a lot of charitable sorts of endeavors. I've always been, but actually connecting with somebody emotionally. It's tough to be close to me, to be married to me or be really close. It just is, because it's not there.
So is there a hopeful aspect to all of this, that having identified this, you can change behavior? Or what's the takeaway for you?
Well, the first thing, the knowledge, I found out I was completely wrong about the science, which was a bitter pill to swallow, because I thought everything was driven by genetics, biology. And I didn't think nurture had anything to do with it. Once I realized, because of the genes I have, that if you're brought up in a very nurturing environment, you can offset the biology.
So you may have genes for this.
I'm scared of playing it for too long. But I do want to keep hearing what he's... Did he say being nurtured could offset the biology? So being good parents could actually trigger it? What? I'm just scared to play it for too long because stupid YouTube. What's this?
In its 260-year history, the Garden City, Augusta, Georgia, has produced many individuals of great accomplishment and distinction. From a president of our country.
Hold on, I was gonna say something. The McDonald triad in kids. Arson, or fascination with burning things and fire. Bedwetting, including peeing weird places on purpose. And what was the third one? Hurting animals. Those are the three things that if you're a parent, that would really suck if you were dealing with that.
To a Supreme Court justice, from military heroes to astronauts, artists, and authors.
What the hell is
these
it?
Extraordinary people. Major George Phineas Butler, headmaster, did medical school in just 3 years. A short residency in surgery, curiosity, and love of writing led Cleckley to document the life stories of a number of these patients. He also decided to define the specific characteristics he encountered. Ann Wolbert Burgess is a psychiatric nurse who is an expert on the rapist and serial killer. In the Mindhunter television series, Burgess is the inspiration for the character Wendy Carr.
What?
He had his patients.
Lesbian FBI agent!
He would go into the institutions. In those times, there would probably be state hospitals, and he would talk with them. And so the clinical interviews became part of his writing on the psychopath. And those were stories that were really very important. They're real stories.
Robert Hare is a renowned Canadian psychologist.
It's really impossible to talk about psychopathy without referring to Cleckley. Now, there are other clinicians that preceded him who had a strong influence upon my work and upon the field of psychopathy. Silvano Arietti, Benjamin Cartman, Schneider, lots of people of this sort. But he was the first one to actually describe in enormous detail individuals that he considered to be psychopathic and those whom he considered to be sort of near.
Okay, I'm gonna pause it. So there was one story in that book, The Mask of Sanity, where it was talking about a mother who had almost died. What was it? Oh, maybe she was just sick. She didn't end up dying, but the father was talking to their son about it, and the son was like, something about like how the son, they'll do things like, I don't want to leave this poker game even though my wife is giving birth, and they are completely oblivious to, they don't, until they, I guess, learn to fake it better, they don't understand why their lack of caring about something that should be important emotionally to them hurts the people around them. Like they can't feel it. They don't understand it. It's weird. But anyway, so the son was like, well, so what if she died? Everyone's got to die eventually, you know? And it's like, you don't talk that way about your mother. He was just like so flippant. It's so weird. I don't want to be like that. I had a weird like jealousy for psychopaths because it would be kind of cool not to have to feel guilty about crap and to, you know, whatever. But they are definitely, they come across as lacking emotional depth, and I wouldn't want to be like that, I suppose.
He called them incomplete manifestations of the disorder, but it was his clinical descriptions that you just keep going back to and back.
And they would get really good at, it's almost like the more you try to treat them, the better they get at hiding their condition. You know, like Bart Simpson saying, I'm sorry without meaning it. You know, they could very convincingly apologize for their behavior. But if you try to probe a little farther, a little deeper about why they, you know, they're trying to show remorse, but they don't know how, they don't have it. So you'll find that they can't quite, what's the word? They can't quite verbally express, like, they can't describe their own remorse. You know, they could fake it pretty well, but if you go a little deeper, they couldn't really explain why they felt bad about something because they didn't feel bad about it. They don't really get it. They just don't feel it. Yeah. Small amygdalas.
Back to and back to. It's hard actually to even discuss psychopathy without making reference to him. And what's happened in the last...
And they get thrills. They seek short-term thrills, you know, because of that boredom they have. So that's why they'll do like this impulsive sort of destructive behavior. It's strange because they're destructive towards their own lives a lot of the time. Not always. Not always.
Last 4 or 5 years is that he's been in fashion for the last 10 or 15 years, certainly amongst psychologists and researchers. But now people are beginning to write things about, collectively, not only the article we put together, but other articles that are describing what his impact was, what the limitations were to the disorder that he described and so forth.
To this day, a phrase he coined, the mask of sanity, is used by professionals in the fields of psychiatry and psychology as a way to describe the psychopath. Christopher Patrick is a professor of psychology at Florida State University. He edited the highly influential book, Handbook of Psychopathy.
And that concept of the mask that he has, I think, is very important to that dualistic conception, that we have something that is disguised and very well hidden by kind of an aspect of the person's nature.
These visuals are
that
funny.
Gives them a special resiliency and gives them a special kind of charisma in a sense. And so
Patrick Bateman.
A number of years ago now, we introduced a model that characterized that part of psychopathy, the mask part, as related to a kind of a dispositional characteristic that we call boldness.
Scott Lilienfeld is a professor of psychology at Emory University.
We and most others think of psychopathy as a constellation of traits that particularly come from 3 areas: interpersonal, affective, and behavioral. and they kind of all come together like three puzzle pieces. So these are individuals who interpersonally are charming and make a good first impression on others. Affectively, they are lacking in deep social emotions like guilt, empathy, and loyalty. And behaviorally, they often have poor impulse control and often act without thinking. I suspect
What is this?
that what we refer to as psychopathy is probably not any one of those. It's probably all three of them in conjunction. So that we think of the psychopath, I think what we're talking about is something of a chimera, something of a hybrid person where they are charming on the surface, likable, but then deep down, lacking in guilt, lacking in empathy, and lacking in impulse control. In some ways, these are people who seem human on the surface, but deep down are profoundly lacking in humanity.
Oh my goodness.
In 1941, Pleckley published a best-selling book, which quickly became the definitive work on this disorder. It is called The Mask of Sanity. Vaughn McCall is the chairman of the Department of Psychiatry and Health Behavior at Augusta University.
It's written as a series of a large number of cases. And the cases...
I don't know if I can play this for so long. We're almost to the hour. I wonder if I should...
are very short, typically 3 to 5 pages each. And each case is intended to illustrate an important teaching point about sociopathic personality. And then the case ends with that teaching point. So
please don't say
very
sociopath.
digestible. The stories are both horrifying and fascinating. So it makes for a good read. And that book still serves as my primary understanding of what antisocial personality disorder is.
I've even recently gone back and read the original 1941 edition because it was so rich in clinical examples and good descriptors of what psychopathy looks like.
An important part of the book is his theory at that time of what caused psychopathy. And it was different from any other disorder in that it involved a very specific kind of deviation or deficit that had to do with something he would describe as analogous to colorblindness. That psychopathic individuals, and he saw it as something that was inborn from an early age, would not respond emotionally in the same way as other people. And so they would learn about the world in kind of a different way, just as if someone who's colorblind has to interpret stoplights or traffic lights and other kinds of stimuli in a different way. You learn about it, but you don't have the same experience that would guide the way that you.
It sounds awesome. Not gonna lie, the worst thing in life is if you're a sensitive as a man, aka a little B word, little bitch. You don't have to be a little bitch in order to not be a psychopath. I mean, there's a lot of places in between. Really, I do think the disadvantage to being a psychopath would be you could be ending up in prison over and over again, or you could be like, you never really can experience true intimacy with another human being, which, I mean, you wouldn't really desire it either, you know? So maybe you wouldn't know what you're missing, but I don't know. I choose emotional depth, and I choose color.
And that was his kind of perspective on
it. Sucks though. It hurts.
Except it wasn't a difference in vision or perception. It was a difference in emotional reactivity. And so there was actually one case described in the book where a woman went through something that was traumatizing, and she, for a temporary period of time, displayed psychopathic behavior, which is interesting. She went numb for a minute and was temporarily acting like a psychopath, but then it, I guess, went away. It's kind of strange. I don't know about that. Actually describes in the book, The Mask of Sanity, that this is something that they're not aware of. You know, it's something that's outside of their experience. And so when they
I'm ignoring that.
And how they react, they kind of gauge that in a different way. And they build a different model of the world that's based on the perspective of someone who just isn't feeling things in quite the same way.
The Mask of Sanity, I think, will always be extremely important. In fact, it's fundamental basic reading for anybody who is interested in either studying psychopathy or trying to understand psychopathy, maybe understanding the psychopaths in their lives.
A master deceiver, secretly possessed of no moral or ethical restraints, yet behaving in public with charm, intelligence, and sophistication. The very idea of this kind of persona electrified American society and led to heightened interest in the detection of hidden psychopaths in society at large.
I think.
Yeah, so what was I list? Something said that it was like less than 1% of the population, but I've always I just today like heard that, but up until now I had heard 10 to 20%, that they make up 10 to 20% of the population, which is actually, I mean, it's still not very many, but I don't know what number is correct. You know, there's a lot of uncertainty around this whole subject, you know, and people studying it, like I said, they want to believe that there's explanations for people's behavior, that you can, you know, that there must be some sort of injury or illness or explanation because of how they were treated as children, and they just have trouble with this concept. But I think it is just a physical, genetic thing, and one that I'm just very fascinated with, you know, because they're almost surprised. They, like the book, he said that although they're good at, you know, having a mask and deceiving, they are also sometimes surprisingly forthright with therapists, and they'll casually make outrageous statements, not realizing how a normal person's gonna hear that. So they're almost like startled and surprised that you're like, you know, if you react like, yeah, it's just funny, I guess. And then they know, and they can learn, oh, that normal human reacted that way to me saying that. So maybe it's just funny because they can't like sense it on their own that what they're saying is like the guy who said everyone has to die eventually. Like, yes, that's true. That is correct. You're not wrong. But you're talking about your mother, and you're not expressing any relief that she didn't die or any anxiety when it seemed like she might die, you know? Like, you're just taking it all in stride, and you're just totally fine. It's weird.
That everybody doing research in this particular field know an awful lot about Cleckley, and that's one of the first things they would do is they would read The Mask of Sanity. We have, interestingly enough, we have a scientific society called the Society for the Scientific Study of Psychopathy, SSSP. It was formed in 2005 right here in Vancouver, and we meet every 2 years. And when we first formed the society, the society honored me by naming a Lifetime Achievement Award after me. It was the R.D. Hare Lifetime Achievement Award.
R.D. Hare.
So I got the first one, I suppose. It seems sort of natural. But the interesting part is that in the last couple of years, posthumously, David Licken and Hervey Cleckley have received the award. And as I've indicated...
Easy to spot, but not at first. Not at first. At first, they're very appealing. Again, charming. It just takes a little bit. Like, I knew a guy that used to pretend to cry, and I don't know why he was doing it. You know, like we'd be watching a movie and he'd pretend to cry. Like if there were no tears. I don't know why he was doing that. I don't know what my point is, but weird.
Elsewhere, for me, that's such an honor to have people who got my career started actually receive an award in my name, which is ironic. It should have been the other way around. It should have been the Hervey Cleckley Lifetime Achievement Award.
During his research, Hare collaborated with Hervey Cleckley on a regular basis. From this collaboration came a checklist for determining who is a psychopath.
And so I'd correspond with Cleckley, and we figure out ways of doing things. And initially we thought, well, we'll divide our subject population up into 3 groups. Those that definitely fit the criteria described by Herbie Cleckley, those that definitely do not, and then somewhere in between. And so this is pretty scientific. We had a 3-point scale now. And editors and reviewers really still didn't know what I was doing.
So, the Green River Killer. Oh, I did have another thing pulled up. Hold on. They can beat lie detectors. They can beat lie detectors. Gary Ridgway beat the lie detector. Psychopathy and physiological detection of concealed information. An emotional detachment. Okay, so what? 2 dimensions are said to underlie psychopathy: emotional detachment and antisocial behavior. Distinct psychophysiological, what the hell? Distinct psychophysiological correlates are hypothesized in these facets of psychopathy. Emotional detachment is associated with deficient fear potentiated startle, and antisocial behavior with reduced orienting. A few studies have examined the effect of psychopathy on the validity of the concealed information tasks. This review suggests that reduced orienting in high antisocial individuals. I just want to know what the results are. Can they? I'm pretty sure they can beat them. Some of them anyway, because they're calm. They're not nervous. And they're pathological liars. Guy pretending to cry while watching Superbad. No, it was something else. I can't even remember. He did it multiple times. It was really weird. But sometimes it was for movie, like I think one was The Core. The Earth, the movie where they drill to the Earth's core. It was just like, what the hell? It's not even a very good movie. Reduced orienting? I guess I can stop. It's been an hour, but I don't know. I used to be more excited about this subject than I have been lately. Truthfully, because I'm so antisocial. Well, okay, I'm using the word wrong. I always use the word antisocial to mean like asocial. That's what I meant to say. I'm not antisocial means you're like harassing people and hurting people and traumatizing people and bugging people. You know, like you're behaving in a way that affects them anyway. So I'm asocial more so than antisocial. But anyway, so I don't really have to deal with people very much. Which is fun. I'm a hermit. I'm very easily startled, so I think that's a sign you're not a psychopath. I've heard people say that, you know how when you yawn, if you see someone yawning, how it makes you yawn? I've heard people say that psychopaths don't have that. It would be interesting if that was true, because they don't have empathy, so they wouldn't see someone yawning and react by, it's like a weird empathetic, I don't know, I'm making up words. Okay? I should stop. Watch The Bad Seed. It's on, I own it, but it's on archive.org. It was made in 1956. It's really funny, actually, and little psychopath kids are funny and scary. I meant to say creepy and scary, not funny. Okay, I say the wrong word sometimes. Sounds like you dodged a bullet. Well, I don't know. Not really. I do think he was a psychopath. His damage was done. Don't you worry. Okay, maybe just a little more of this. Sorry. I feel like I haven't really done the topic justice, but I don't know. It's hard when Fallon's not here.
You may have these areas of the brains which aren't developed and stuff, but because of the way you were brought up, the foundation that your family gave you, you don't act out on these behaviors.
And we just found out in the past 2 years.
Wait, so he's saying that having a nurturing childhood was a good thing? Maybe. I don't know.
Some of these genes that were kind of warrior genes that put you at risk if you're abused early on, if you're treated with love and you're not abandoned or anything like that, it has the opposite effect. It kind of washes all the negatives away. So you still have some traits, but you don't have the full-blown psychopathy. So I think I was saved by...
Whatever, you know, that's not necessarily true. Having good parents isn't going to save you necessarily. I don't know.
Nurturing environment and a really loving extended family. My mother saw something early on, which she finally told me last year that something wasn't right. And
really?
Yeah.
She identified that early on?
Yeah, she told me, started telling me things. Wow. Yeah, and it was really a surprise. Huh? She says, you never told anybody, because I was heading in a dark direction. And, you know, and I realized a lot of this kind of happy talk that I, you know, and very gregarious sort of stuff, I'm always on the make. Not sexually or trying to get money, but I'm always trying to get people into my world, even if it's for 5 minutes.
I'm convinced, I mean, I find this whole topic of psychopaths really interesting because I'm convinced there's a lot more people out there who are psychopaths than we realize, and particularly successful people, accomplished people, you know, people on TV, people in the political sphere. I'm convinced there are tons of psychopaths.
Oh yeah, and if you, Anderson, if you look at, there was just a study done, a scientific study of all our presidents, and all the biographers answered all these questions about them, and it was on a scale of psychopathy. And on the scale of psychopathy, in sort of the one part of psychopathy, not the criminality part, but the other part, which is a big part of psychopathy, the ones who scored very high were like Theodore Roosevelt, JFK, FDR, Bill Clinton, very high. The ones had no psychopathy at all in this were people like Jimmy Carter, Gerald Ford. And when you look at the association of those psychopathic traits with leadership, it's like we want these people, right? Because they do.
Okay, I do have to say Trump definitely has some psychopathic traits. Grandiose sense of self.
Things
comes to mind.
They take chances. They lie at the right time. You know, FDR was lying all the time, but he saved us, so it was okay.
Did he though?
At people,
did he though?
That we choose to be leaders. I think a lot of them have these traits, and they're part of leadership skills.
I also think what it takes to propel somebody into the public sphere, propel somebody to success, I mean, it's not, they are not normal impulses, I think. And I think a lot of them are psychopathic impulses.
If you have that grand vision.
Okay, I have to go to the bathroom, so I have to stop soon, but Ted Bundy had a girlfriend named Stephanie, I think. Samantha, whatever, Susan, I don't know, started with an S, I think, but she came from a wealthy family. He felt intimidated by her. He wanted to impress her family. He wanted her to be his lady, and but he was like intimidated, whatever, like wanted to. He saw her as like someone that he wanted to like get a step up socially. She dumped him, and he methodically won her back so that he could dump her. So a very shallow, revengey kind of thing to do.
Because psychopaths will have a grand vision. Not all of them. Some are just lousy rats, but people have that grandiose narcissistic need, and they've got something to prove, and they've got something, they say, I'm going to save the world. That's part of it. It doesn't make you psychopathic, but it's one of the traits that fits into this puzzle of psychopathy.
It's really fascinating. Thank you so much for talking about it.
Okay, I'm going to stop, you guys. Thank you for watching. Psychopaths are cool. I mean, they're not cool! Damn it! Ah! Stop! Oh, I've lost it. I've lost it. Flushed. Okay. Oh, it's hot because I turned off the air conditioner. Yeah, I'm gonna stop and turn that back on, and watch out for them, you guys. They know the words, but not the tune, not the melody. You'll sense it after they charm you. Okay. Bye.